What if the reason that you feel stuck or you can't even move forward is not because you haven't done enough healing work, but because there are feelings that you haven't allowed yourself to feel? Because most of us don't actually avoid the healing, we avoid the feeling. And today's conversation is about one of the hardest things, in my opinion, to feel, and that is grief. Hey, and welcome to Masks Off, Inner Freedom for People Pleasers and Perfectionists. This is a podcast for those who are tired of holding it all together. I'm Kim Gross, your host, and if you've ever felt like you're doing all the right things, but still feel anxious, disconnected, or quietly burned out, you're in the right place. Here we talk about the patterns you don't even realize you're living inside of: self-abandonment, over-functioning, chasing approval, and mistaking productivity for your worth, and more. This isn't about fixing yourself. It's about remembering who you were before you learned to perform, perfect, and please to belong. Each week, we'll slow things down. We'll unpack the nervous system, the inner critic, and the subtle ways that you learned to disconnect from your true self so you can stop living from pressure and start living from presence. This is your space to take the masks off. So let's begin. This month, we have been in what I've been calling the feeling error. And we've been learning this path to freedom, to be able to feel our feelings and to heal. And it's through the feeling and not through fixing that we actually have the freedom. And today I have a guest with me, Marie Cruz, and I'm so excited to have you on today and to talk about what so many of us are unconsciously avoiding. And that is grief, loss, and emotional pain. So I would love for you to take a moment, Marie, welcome. I would love for you to take a moment and just introduce yourself to the audience in your own words. You can tell us what you do and how did you even come to this work?
My story is so broad, but I'll start with what brought me to this work. In 2012, I became a health and wellness coach, guide. I was mostly looking at nutrition and weight loss and how our mind and body interacts and how everything affects all of it. So I had a national team and I was mentoring and coaching through personal development. And I had left corporate America after doing a office management position and struck out on my own. And then in 2016, I lost my mom suddenly. She wasn't ill or anything. She just had a heart event and we lost her and we found her. So there was some PTSD with that. And then just 20 months, just shy of 2 years later, my son took his own life. He was 22.
Mm.
And
I'm so sorry for your loss.
thank you.
Mm.
Also, just completely no warning, nothing, truly nothing, no evidence. And so another round of PTSD after I had been working pretty hard to just get find my footing after losing my mother. So what happened when I lost him was extremely and entirely different than losing my mom. So, losing a child rearranges your entire identity and being. I often say, like, giving birth to your first child changes you in a way that no one can explain until you literally live through it. You don't realize when you birth a child that you're inextricably changed. So for those who do have children, if you think about who you were before and after, and think about that enormity, that's what happens when you lose a child. And I've worked with hundreds of women now, so I've seen this over and over. But what happens is society's not talking about this. And even if they were, if you haven't been through it, you're not listening. You aren't listening because you are, it's kind of like the thing you don't look at. Maybe it won't ever happen to you. So yeah, that's how I got here. So the work I was already doing molded and melded and moved with what I was needing to get through, to figure it out.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I do think what you said was so important, which is that if people aren't experiencing the loss of a child, they're not going to listen or know how to respond. And I do think there is even probably, especially for moms who have children, there's this avoidance of not even wanting to go there to even think about what that could potentially be like. So it's just pretend that, like hope and pray and pretend it never happens kind of thing. But what I think I would love to like get into in this episode is, and I imagine this is a place that you've gotten to, and I think that it's important to help the audience to have some hope and realize that you can have peace and joy, and they can coexist with even the deepest grief. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that has been my signature phrase because I believe as a society, my experience in our world was that if this happens to you, you can't be okay. You're like your life is over, and it is over as you know it, but that there is no hope, there is no way through. This is the nightmare that mothers are most afraid of. And so the messaging is, and we say it, and I've said it, like, there's no way I could survive if something happened to one of my kids. I mean, probably all of us have said it, and you say it tongue in cheek because you really never think it'll happen to you. And yet it does more often than our consciousness allows us to understand or absorb. And so then what? And so the messaging is, this is it. You're done. Your happiness is gone. You can't get it back. And, the thing I'm most grateful for having gone through this is my own grit, my own tenacity and resilience. I'm not suffering through that. Like, I refused to receive that as an edict or a sentence. Losing him is a life sentence. It is impacting the rest of my life. But I also get a choice. We get a choice. And whether that's someone who's lost their spouse, or they have lost their parent and that's their first major loss, or someone significantly else close to them, doesn't have to be child loss. There's still a decision. And this decision is, what now? What are you going to choose to do with your life moving forward? And that has been my decision. Was I was going to find my way back to peace in something. Otherwise, I was going to lose all the other things in my life that meant something to me. My husband, my daughter, I have a huge family. And I just wasn't willing to sacrifice everything else for this grief. I just decided, and here I am. And I can assure you the path is possible and it's probable if you just don't quit and you apply whatever you can get your hands on. I particularly use journaling, but I am definitely living with peace and joy and allowing it to coexist with this really great grief. And I think the worst message is people thinking that if you find peace and joy again, you're not going to be sad, because then when the sadness shows up again, when the grief, which is mostly ever present, appears, you think you fit. Well, I thought I found it, but I didn't. So the word coexisting for me is the magical word, the thing that makes it all realistic and possible.
So we're going to talk a little bit later about the journaling because I know you have a process, but I first want to mention that I think when people hear the word grief, they immediately think death. I know I do. And I know that when we had our
Correct.
initial conversation, that is what I initially associate with grief is death. But the truth is that grief is so much more than that. It can be loss of identity. It can be loss of relationships, loss of expectations, the loss of who you thought you might be and didn't turn out to be, dreams. So I'm just curious, how do you define grief? When you talk about it, how do you define it? And what are some ways in which people are even grieving and they might not even know that they're grieving? Like some
Yes.
signs, subtle signs that, like, oh, you might be having some grief going on.
So one of my favorite things that my therapist ever said to me, said, with change, with all change, there's loss. And with loss, there is grief. And so then grief permeates all of our lives on different levels. The problem is we label it as something other than that. Because when we're grieving, often we will extend compassion, even to ourselves. But if it's something else, right? So a divorce is massive grief for all of it, the dreams, all of it.
Yeah.
It's the grief that your children are going to live this new way. It's all of it. But with that grief, we may label it as failure. We may just label it as anger or disappointment. And those things don't often get the same level of compassion just for humanity. Like my divorce, when I divorced him, there was some relief. But even in that, there's intense grief. It was better for me to be out of that marriage. And it was profound loss. And so I think we tend to minimize the major things. So the other big one that I think we don't give enough credence to is empty nesting.
I was going to say that one.
Yeah, any and all the layers where our children move into a more independent role, any of them. You think about, some moms are grieving when their children go to kindergarten and they're not their babies anymore. There's grief with any transitions and loss. And even in the transitions that are good, there's still grief. Think about like people who get a brand new job, they're leaving their friends. They're leaving the comfort of the job they already have. Even though it looks like something good, it still brings grief and loss of something else, even when it's moving in a good direction. So I think that grief is probably the most fearful word because it's so closely linked to death. But I also think that grief is the most underutilized. That if we labeled things as grief, not taking away from intense, profound loss, if we labeled them as grief, then we could apply, engender, receive more compassion from others and ourselves. And then the healing can show up quicker with the compassion.
So if that's the case, then why do you think, myself included, why do you think we can tend to minimize our grief?
So, well, other emotions feel safer,
Mm,
right? Anger feels safer to me in my body. I roll really well in anger. Like
mm,
it's my power. It's not really, but it
yeah.
feels powerful. So I'd rather be pissed at everybody than sad.
Mm,
So I think that we just default,
mm,
right? Even if we say move into forgiveness, there's still a level of power in that. And grief is sadness,
mm,
it's heavy, it hurts in a way that doesn't feel powerful. And you're just in it. And that is not comfortable for most people, including myself,
mm.
until it is. And when it is, it's no longer this big, huge ordeal. I think if we taught children grief early and made it acceptable, their entire worlds would be transformed because when they lose something, and little kids are better at this than we are, right? Because we just numb it out later on in life. But if we allowed that to continue to be okay, yeah, I'm really happy that we're
Yeah.
doing XYZ, but I'm also really sad that that's the dichotomy that I live in now, right? We bought property, we built a beach house. When we bought the property, the day we're at the property, we bought a really great bottle of champagne. We drank some champagne, my husband and I, and then we left. And I called my daughter and I was so excited, literally elated. And it was fun. And then I hung up and I broke down, like instantly broke down. And it wasn't even four thoughts, it was one. And the one thought is, and he will never be a part of this. And so I think that my experience is when we allow that to be what it is, I can be elated about one thing and sad about another thing. And it doesn't mean anything. It just is what it is in our
Mm.
scale of human emotions. We just allow for all of them. And grief is a big one that we're all living in, with, and through, or denying and
Yeah,
stuck.
I'm sure we will say many more profound things throughout this episode, but I think what you just said there, and I want to underline it and I want to highlight it because it was so profound that you can hold both states. We live in such a world where things are black and white, right or wrong. Like you said, that dichotomy of it has to be one or the other. And then to label and judge if we're in a place of vulnerability because we are taught so early on that vulnerability is weakness. So if I'm being sad, if I'm feeling grief, I must be weak at some level.
Or you must not be grateful for what you
Yes.
have. That's a big one. Like I'm on one hand living this dream. And so it's like, how could you be sad? Well, because another thing my therapist gave me was because you're just human.
Yeah.
Because you're just human and we have complex emotions and they all are coming and going and moving at the same exact time. And the ones we reject become poison in our bodies.
Yeah. I so agree with that. So at the end of the day, as we were saying, that to the audience, you don't have to lose a person to experience grief. You just have to lose something that mattered to you. And then so much of this that we're talking about relates to the work that I do around the inner controller And I'm realizing as we are talking here that this is the part that is terrified of grief. Just like you said, we just want to stay away from those emotions for so many reasons that you just named. So the inner controller, my inner controller, when it comes to grief or loss or sadness, it's like, oh no, 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 we're not going there. So you know
Right.
what? I'm going to keep you super busy. I'm
Yep.
going to make you keep it all together.
Yep.
Right? And I'm going to like not allow you to go there because it's going to be too hard and too painful. And you know what? You're probably going to fall apart. So I'm going to keep you away from grief and sadness. This is what the inner controller does. I want to pause for a moment and share a resource I created for those of you who are ready to go deeper than a podcast episode. If you're noticing your patterns, the overthinking, the self abandonment, the inner critic, but you're not sure how to actually shift them, I've created a digital course that walks you through that process step by step. This course is designed to help you understand why you are the way you are from a nervous system and conditioning perspective. And more importantly, how to start responding differently with awareness instead of self-judgment. You can move through it at your own pace, in your own time, and come back to it whenever you need grounding or clarity. If that sounds supportive, you can learn more by visiting my website, www.kimgrosscoaching.com. All the details are there.
Also, and you might not be able to survive it. That is the crux.
Do you want to say
Of
more
it.
about that? What happens when we don't allow grief to happen? But go ahead and say some
Well,
more
no,
about
I
that.
mean, like the inner, you were calling it inner
Inner
controller,
controller.
and I call it the committee. Like I have a committee and they're loud and they are bussy and they got me through my childhood, but I
Yes.
don't need them anymore. But they, it's like maybe you won't survive if you look
Mm,
at it. Maybe you won't
yes.
survive if you allow that level of pain to surface. And I discovered after I lost my son, there's no escaping this.
Yeah.
There's
You
no
can't
running.
run. No
No,
running.
a divorce, I think a lot of times people, and that's a profound, profound loss. They say it's up there in the top, say 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
Divorce, we could distract ourselves. We can distract ourselves with the kids, with a new relationship. We can literally put the pain away and not look at
Yeah.
it on purpose. And losing someone close to you leaves a void in a
Mm,
way you can't look away. You cannot. And so the gift, and it's taken me a long time to say
I'm
that
sure.
without just being infuriated at the universe,
Mm,
the gift that I have allowed myself to receive through the loss of my son is that I couldn't run from any of it.
yeah.
I learned how to sit with it and look at it. And I think even before that, though, I already knew how toxic. I used to even tell my kids, like up and out, like get it out of your body some kind of way. If it's about me, go find somebody to tell, like go get it out of your body because it becomes toxic. So I knew if I sat in it and I didn't let it come through, that this is, in my opinion, why we see so much disease. I'm not saying if you get a disease, it is your fault. It might
Yeah.
be the fault of a society who teaches us not to process our emotions all the way through, but that is my interpretation of the mind body connection. And so grief has its way, whether you allow it or not.
Yeah. And if we don't allow it, if we try to run from it and we try to avoid it, what I hear you saying is that it will get stored in the body, in your nervous system, and wreak havoc in some way, shape, or form, whether it ends up in disease or just keeping you stuck in the same place and you just can't move forward. It doesn't go away.
Well, if we think about something happens, we have thoughts and emotions that come from the event.
Yeah.
It's emotions are energy and motion. So an energy is created. Grief is an energy and it enters our body. And there's a really profound book called The Body Keeps the Score. It's so amazing. But that energy is going to do something. And it's either going to, if you think about even like electricity, it's going to pass through and end up somewhere.
Yep.
You think about lightning, right? It's going to scorch what it can't get through next, right? But I think of grief the same way. And if we give it an outlet, it's less likely to settle and simmer in places we don't want it, or to come out somewhere else.
Yeah.
Like anger, rage, those kinds of things. Give it its own voice, then it can move all the way through.
Absolutely. So going back to the inner controller, even though our inner controller is trying to protect us from not feeling, it is actually blocking us from healing.
Absolutely.
And I
Its
think
job is just to keep us safe.
just to keep us safe.
It thinks bad emotion,
Yes.
danger, don't.
Yeah.
Avoid, move, do something, distract. When in fact, the physiology of us needs the processing to get it through. And it just is at odds with the committee.
With the committee.
Yeah, or the controller. It's just the job of both of those things are at odds, you know?
For me, what I find to be true is my inner controller came into existence when I was very, very young. So it was subconscious, of course. And there was like, of course, I have to protect you. And as a young child, I believed that if I allowed myself to feel big emotions or feel pain, that somehow I was going to go down into this deep, dark abyss that I would never come back from. Now, I know that now as an adult, and cognitively, I know that's not true. But my inner controller didn't know that and doesn't know that, which is why my wise self, my adult self, has to say, no, it's okay. It's okay, inner controller. It's safe. We can do this. So I know that you work with women around grief and loss. And speaking about safety and creating, how do you help the women that you work with to feel their grief, their loss, their emotions, their feelings in a safe way?
So I have kind of two buckets that I move into
Sure.
arenas. One is directly mothers who've lost a child, and one is women who they don't even know they're grieving all the other issues that we're calling it other things, right? So with that group, with the women who I call it empowerment coaching, everybody spends all this time looking outside of themselves. I'm guilty of this 100%, not much anymore because I'm been practicing so long. But this idea that if my husband did the right things, I would be happy. If X, Y, Z, let's fill in the blank with all of the things, right? If my children are happy, I'm happy. If they're sick, whatever. I mean, a million, right? If my parents are happy with me, I could be okay. And so it's external locus of control, right? Like we're looking outside of ourselves for validation of who we are, that we're enough or we're not too much. That was my big one, or whatever it is. And what I do is teach a process by which they come home to themselves over and over and over, so much so that it eventually rewires the necessity of the committee or the inner controller. And so if the committee's job is to keep me safe and I start to keep myself safe, I start to rewire that need going on, and it's of little use anymore. So my committee is pretty silent of late. But anyway, what I do with women is teach them how to walk through that, teach them, that if you keep returning to yourself, validating yourself, loving yourself, have compassion, seeing yourself for who you actually are. I've done so much of this work for myself. It's like I wasn't just a 20-year-old, 20 something all the way through my 20s yelling at my kids. I was a 20-year-old holding it together with a crack addict husband and a special needs child. Like when I start to see my identity in its real light, I start to give myself compassion. It's not an excuse. It is a really valid event, a reason life went the way it went. And so that's where the healing's at. It's in like when something happens to us, we tell a story about it. And the story we almost always tell is it defines us, right? Your parents scream at you. It could be because they are pissed off at each other, but it defines me. The work I do is really identity work. It's like healing how we see ourselves and bringing it to the truth of who we are. And in that, there's more power in that than any other healing that there is. And this is just evidentiary of what I've experienced and what I witness over and over again.
It's so interesting what you were saying because the episode right before this, the solo one I just did, is on ownership. And so you mentioned that no one is going to come along and save you or do this for you or the healing work for you. So that was number one. It was all about ownership and taking responsibility, not for how other people show up, but for your part, your co-creation. What do you do next?
Yep.
So it's about that. But then the key component is about self-compassion. It's not about now swinging the pendulum from blaming your husband, spouse, partner, boss, coworker, or whoever you are used to blaming, and then swing the pendulum to blaming yourself. It's not about that. It's about having compassion for yourself. And it's just like, okay, this is my pattern showing up like this. This is not who I am. I'm not bad.
Right.
I'm not wrong
Well, the
for
compassion
this.
is for your humanity. Like who you showed up as is also part of your survival wiring.
Yes.
What happens is we tell the story from one viewpoint, right? So if the story is, because this was the story in my head, my daughter's 33 now and she's about to have a baby, and she is like still very hyper vigilant, all these things. And my story was, oh my gosh, she got that from me, even though I worked so hard to heal all the way through my 20s, which is pretty miraculous in and of itself. But I didn't get any credit for that. Only was telling the story that she got that from me. She took that, her perfectionism, because I was the way I was. And then the healing, the compassion comes in when I look at her, me at 20 something, and I see a mother busting her butt in all this therapy, doing all the things. Yes, I'm yelling at my kids. I was a lunatic, but I was there. I was present. I was safety for them. I was doing the other thing. Like I was only giving myself credit for what didn't go quote. And so the work I do is about when you keep going within and you seek out your full truth, because our truth about ourselves is distorted by the stories we created about ourselves in the time frame that they happen, and then they shape the rest of our lives, right? So if as a little girl, my mom was unavailable because she was very depressed, but my internal wiring, my story about me was I was too much. I talked too much. I needed too much. And there wasn't that available in my arena, well, guess what happens? I'm 40 something years old, still dialing it down, still apologizing, still trying to, keep it under wraps. I'm not even my full authentic self because the story I created. My mom didn't create that story. She was loving. She loved me. I know she loved me. She told me she loved me. But I created the story by what was not available in the energetic field. And so the healing is going in and rewiring, finding, questioning, applying the truth, and rewiring to the whole story. Because guess what happens? The nervous system settles down. The committee quiets down because the committee's not being like, every time, oh my God, I shouldn't have said that. Oh, did I say too much? Did I talk? The committee trying to keep me safe. Marie, you got to dial it down. You got to dial it down. Well, not really. And without the committee, I am more present and more peaceful and more at ease. The emotional medicine that I have found that has worked for me for years and works for the women I work with is to go find yourself in your story. Find the loopholes, find the places that you haven't applied the full truth. And that will set you free. You will set yourself free. And now it won't matter. It literally will not matter whether or not your husband tells you you're beautiful enough or sweet enough, whatever we do, whatever we think is gonna fix the problem, and none of those things, they all stop having meaning. Like, it's not that you don't appreciate those things. You don't need them because your sense of self is so whole and so full and so intact that everything else becomes a bonus.
Yeah. So I will also say that you have a journaling method called the Nautilus Way that helps women process emotions and rewires beliefs, which you were just talking about. Can you say a little bit more about this journaling method? Like, how does it work and why do you love it so much and use it?
I remember hearing you would find yourself on the pages of a journal. And for me, who had a very busy committee in my head, traditional meditation, I just couldn't. I would try and try. It was like the committee was so loud. It never settled my nervous system because I felt like it just gave space for the committee to scream at me louder. But journaling was like I could see what I was thinking, because there's a sort of journaling called stream of consciousness where you just get to witness what you're thinking. And when I started to practice that, it was like, it's right here and I get to see what I'm thinking, not to judge it or analyze it, but just to see, to notice what is going on. And so years and years before all of this took place, I was already in a journaling habit of doing what's called the daily pages in a book by Julia Cameron called The Artist's Way. And it's just like sitting with yourself. So my therapist said at some point, your journaling has become your meditation, because I was being present with my thoughts. And at some point, I started to receive messages back. At the time, I believed or labeled it as God talking to me, or spirit, or later I now would identify it as my higher self. I started to run women's retreats and I wanted to teach them this healing that I was getting out of these journals, but I didn't know I had a method. I didn't know I was doing it a certain way. If you don't really know what you're doing, there's no form to it. I just get them to write and it wouldn't stick. And I'd get them to write and it wouldn't stick. Over time, I was like, why aren't they getting it? Then I thought, well, maybe they're just not a writer or whatever. And then the method showed up. I'm going to say I channeled it, and people might think it's woo-woo. I don't care. It came from somewhere, but it wasn't me saying, let me put a method together. That wasn't it. And it showed up. And then I started to teach it and it started to stick and they could see it. And it was blatantly obvious that if we move through the method, which is starting with a stream of consciousness, moving into, now we have our thoughts on paper, we're going to examine them and question them. We're going to say, what else could be true? What is more true? What is the rest of the truth in certain scenarios? Then we're going to rewrite it. And I have like a bypass because most of us don't know how to love ourselves. We don't even know how to hold space or have compassion for who we are. I couldn't at first. I have created a bypass so that we could get to that a different way. And then there's the reveal, which is the journal, the review, the questioning, the rewrite, and then the rewiring comes in accepting the more truth and practicing it in our day-to-day. And when you do that daily or enough, whatever that looks like for somebody, you rewire the committee. They start to believe like you're safe enough and they quiet. And then you live from this other place, from your truest self. And it just comes in layers and you trust what shows up. So that is the actual work I do. And a lot of people come to the retreats and they get the thing they need and they leave and they journal. And then some people work with me, one-on-one for a few months and they rewire enough that they are different human beings.
This is a really powerful bridge for the audience because it gives the inner controller something to do, right? And
Correct.
which is journaling, while at the same time still allowing the body to feel. And so this is amazing. And I have journaled for years. In fact, my book that came out a year and a half ago, my book is based off of 21 years worth of my journals. And so it's very personal, very vulnerable, because when you're journaling, you're just sharing your deepest vulnerable feelings, thoughts. And so that is the foundation for my book. And we're talking about both. And it was a huge healing opportunity and growth for me. I can't even say enough about journaling, even for myself. So, again, I want to go back to what we had talked about earlier, which is that you had said that you can feel a deep sense of grief and still at the same time experience peace. They can coexist. And I think that it would be important to just take a moment for the audience who's still thinking, after hearing us say that in the beginning, like, how is that possible? I don't even see that being possible for me to feel peace and joy at the same time that grief and loss is coexisting. How is that even possible? And maybe say a little bit more about how that shifted for you.
I think if we all go back and look at times in our life, we've experienced this already on smaller occasions. Think about if you were trying out for something and you made it and your friend didn't. You were both elated and sad at the same time.
Good point.
So there's evidence that this is possible. The problem comes in the bigger, deeper issues. We also have evidence in that, let's say after my mom passed, my daughter's an actress and she's performing and she's Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. And I'm really sad, but I'm elated because I'm sad my mom's not there, but I'm elated that my daughter is. And actually that happened in college because my mom was present for that one. And she went to college and she continued to get these roles. But I'm sad. My mom was one of my daughter's biggest supporters, but I'm elated for my daughter. There is evidence that we can hold both. The problem is the messaging that if it is huge, profound, you shouldn't. That, like, if I remember the first moment that I was trying to clean my house, I could literally tell you what I was listening to, how it went down. I was trying to clean my house and I put on some music, and I felt the first moment, I think, of relief, like a breath. I don't know if it was all the way to I'm going to be okay, but it was joy in the moment. I was a dancer growing up, so I felt it. And in that instant, I thought, my committee said, what kind of mom are you? Like, how can you be okay? And I had a whole meltdown. And then the medicine for me in that moment was to bring the truth. The truth is, I was a damn good mom, and I still am. And I did a lot of things wrong, and I got a lot of things right. And if love could have saved that kid, he would be here. And so that's how, because, and I'll go back to that original idea, by bringing the rest of the truth in, because the committee's job is to keep us safe. The committee's messaging is you shouldn't feel like this.
Yeah.
And I have to bring in enough truth that the committee goes, oh, or I thank it for trying to help me, and dismiss it. And some people do that really heavy-handedly, like not today, and ugly to the committee or the inner critic or controller. So that's how you moment by moment remind yourself that who's in control, what the rest of the truth is. If you don't know the rest of the truth, go find it.
Yeah, for sure. So healing isn't about replacing the grief with joy or peace. It's about expanding our capacity to hold both.
Yes. When I came into this world, I was human, happy and sad when I didn't get what I wanted. I was all those things until we get all these distortions, and we all have them. And it doesn't mean we grew up in a terrible home. It's what we do.
Yeah.
Think about the mom and the dad who are loving and present and all the things, and mom's just upset about something else one day, and the child internalizes it because that's what little kids do. And now all of a sudden the child's like, I gotta not be what I am right now because that caused mom to be like she is, period. And it could be that simple. We get distortions. And the whole idea of healing is returning to who we were before the distortions, who we are in our raw human state. A baby, you're mad when you're mad, you're happy when you're happy. Life doesn't go your way, you're not happy about it. Life goes your way, you're happy about it. That's just humanity. And we put all these labels and stuff on it. And so healing becomes less of like, I think there's less shame in it, because it's like, I don't need to heal because I was broken, I was wrong. I want to heal because I just want to go back. Whatever gets you back to your wholeness, do that.
Yeah.
If higher self language works, if whatever, but returning to something that was never broken to begin with. That's what I think healing looks like.
Yeah, let's I think we should just leave it right there, because that was just so beautifully said. And if I were to add anything at all to what you said, I would just say to the audience that there is no need to rush this process. There's no fixing. You don't have to fix, even if you're just returning to your wholeness and you're coming back home to yourself. There's nothing to fix. There's nothing,
not broken,
because we're not broken to begin with. So a process can take time. So there's no rush, pain, grief, loss. It's going to do it on its own time.
Right. And I think the controller's job is to stop the hurting.
Yes.
And when we go, I think though what we learn over time is that touching it doesn't destroy us. The fear in touching it starts to diminish. So the women who come to my retreats again and again, they understand, I'm going to feel this. It's not going to kill me. We're going to have drinks and play games later. I'm going to go home and I'm going to be more whole because I'm going to have more of myself intact. Same with it, but it's the same for everybody who's returning to their healing journey. And so the committee gets quieter because it gets less afraid. It's like, oh, she survived that. Oh, she survived it again. Oh, she survived it again. And, in my desperation of where to put all this grief with my son, I learned that I could go sit and cry and sob and wail and be pissed and all the things. And then I could move. I could go live my life, and something might poke that and it's back, but then it's not going to keep me under.
And to just kind of round it out again, because the whole month I've been talking about, it's the feeling error. It's about feeling it to free it. And that's what you're saying is the inner controller quiets. What results is freedom. So finally, for the listener who's listening right now and is thinking to herself that this was amazing, you have so much to offer there. They heard something about your journaling, they heard something about your retreats. Just share with the audience where they can find you.
So my website is the best place because it has all my socials linked, which is mariecruz.com, spelled Crews. On there, I have a consultation page, so you can request a free consultation. Just have a 15-minute call with me or a Zoom, whatever they prefer. And then I offer a free journal jumpstart workshop that I did a while back. And it was a Zoom, so it's a video, but it's just like, where do you start? It's not my process, my whole program, but it's where do you start? The Journal Jumpstart workshop shows you where to get started and some things that can come from it. If you go to my website, you can just click the link to get that and it'll automatically show up for you.
Awesome.
But thank you. This has been lovely.
Yeah, this was a phenomenal conversation. I love having chats with like-minded people, and I could literally talk about this stuff morning, noon, and night. However, but thank you so, so much for being here. And I really did enjoy the conversation. As we wrap up today's episode, I just want to say thank you for being here and for taking this time for yourself. If this episode resonated with you, I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe to the podcast or leave a review. Even a quick star rating helps more people find this space and reminds the algorithms that these conversations matter. And I'd love to hear from you. If you have a question, a takeaway, or something that came up while you were listening, leave a comment or send it in. Let's keep the conversation going. This podcast isn't meant to be a one-way street. It's meant to feel like a community. If you want to learn more about me, my work, or the ways we can go deeper together, you can visit my website. All the details are there. Until next time, take a breath, take the mask off, and be gentle with yourself. I'll see you soon.